Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. This is my second report of the day. And we've got the news here from Newsweek that President Trump moves to disable Russia as a petrostate. So the question in this video is, can he do it? And the bigger question is, why is he trying to do that? So anyway, we have this article here. Of course, Russia is a petrostate. Why? Because Newsweek tells us, right? Well, there must be some evidence that it's a petrostate. If it's a petrostate, they told us, like John McCain told us, that Russia was basically a gas station with nukes. So that seems like a pretty common understanding of Russia from the United States. Now, is this a poor understanding of those who are in power, or is this the truth? So anyway, we're going to try to dig down into this a little bit and figure out what's going on. So anyway, here in this article, it says countries doing business with Russia could face severe sanctions, President Donald Trump has said, as he teased legislation that could further hurt the country's status as a key energy exporter. So anyway, President Trump, with one move of the pen, could completely ruin Russia, bring it to its knees financially, and all energy exports. I mean, that is basically what Newsweek is saying. And of course, my understanding is this is quite delusional, but I'll show you why. And we have even Trump getting into this. You know, the peace president who was going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, and then it became 100 days, and then, and then now we are in November. So we're just a couple of months away from 1 year anniversary, January 20th, when President Trump took office and began this whole effort to supposedly end the war in Ukraine. So anyway, what did Trump say? Trump told reporters Sunday that congressional Republicans were readying legislation, otherwise known as Lindsey Graham, to sanction countries trading with Moscow in a move that comes only weeks after the U.S. sanctioned Russian energy giants Rosneft and Lukoil. So basically, the sanction that the United States carried out against Rosneft and Lukoil basically were useless. So now they're going to throw the kitchen sink at the problem, and they're going to take down Russia with one little movement of the pen. President Trump will sign into law these sanctions against any country doing business with Russia, and the whole house of cards that Russia has built will fall to its knees, and Russia will be forced to stop its war in Ukraine. So anyway, all these series of presuppositions and understood scenarios, we have seen these in the past. We've seen them in Afghanistan about the surge. It was going to take down the Taliban. It was going to take full control over 100% of the territory in Afghanistan. And what did we get? Is the United States still in Afghanistan? Did the United States win over the Taliban? Okay, so we have all these narratives, and they come out to the U.S. media, and they feed it to you without any evaluation, without any common sense, without any real understanding. It seems they just, President Trump says it, and they're the obedient, puppy dogs that go out and fetch the newspaper in the morning and bring it, and bring the master his slippers. So the U.S. media is incapable of questioning any of these narratives. We got Newsweek, which is a very well known and long-standing, some understand it as news media, basically a propaganda network for the U.S. government and U.S. interest, the deep state, the three-letter agencies, what have you. But anyway, They even have an expert who can assure us that these sanctions are going to work. So we got Berlin-based energy analyst Thomas O'Donnell told Newsweek that further sanctions were part of an escalating U.S.-Ukraine joint offensive on Moscow that will do great damage to Russian revenues. Oh my goodness, the people in Russia are trembling. They're trembling, and they're going to count the money in their bank account because they're going to go bankrupt, and their stock market's going to crash, and everyone is going to go out in front of their home and put a table and start putting shoes and socks and clothes to sell because they're going to be out of money, out of a job, out of a country. So anyway, we got these narratives in Newsweek is just all in. They want to support that, that measure from President Trump, even though it makes 0 sense and there's no evidence to show that any of the sanctions against Russia have done anything except strengthen Russia. If you think the U.S. economy, its GDP growth is maybe 1.6, 1.8, and Russia is about 5. It's coming down, of course, because there was the economy was actually growing too fast, and then they got into inflation, so they're starting to slowly ratchet down the inflation, and that's impacting the economy, but they're certainly not going to get to 0, and it'll only be a short-term lull in their growth, and then they'll go back into the growth mode again. But anyway, we have, assurances that this is going to work. But what if it doesn't work? Now, since the United States has thrown the kitchen sink at this problem, do you think that they can go back and meet with Russia about nuclear weapons treaties? Okay, let's come up with nuclear weapons treaties and have mutual visitations to the nuclear weapon sites of the different nations so we can control all that. No, we're losing confidence between the two countries. And they say the mojo created from the Alaska meeting, which really I don't know how much mojo was created on the U.S. side. Maybe on the Russian side they were hoping that the U.S. was changing positions. But anyway, it was confirmed that the U.S. isn't. So anyway, we go back to this title here. Trump moves to disable Russia as petro-state. So we're so sure that Russia is a petro-state. So anyway, I go to ChatGPT, throw in a couple of questions here. USA energy sales as percentage of GDP, 5.8. Russia, in 2021, the oil and gas budget revenues were 7%. Okay, so it's higher than the U.S. In 2023, 5.3. So Russia is actually bringing in less oil and gas revenue as part of their GDP than the U.S. So is the U.S. a defunct petrostate? Is the U.S. a gas station with nukes? I guess that's the conclusion if the U.S. has more, a higher percentage of GDP for gas and oil sales. So, so we're not looking, apparently we're not looking at a petrostate. So let's go into ChatGPT. Let's look at Saudi Arabia. Would be your classic petrostate, although they're diversifying. Saudi Arabia. So what is that for Saudi Arabia? So 42%, that's a lot. 42% of GDP comes from their oil and gas sales. That is a petrostate. So let's go up here. Russia, 5.3. Okay. We have Saudi Arabia, 42%. Okay, what would be another petrostate? How about, let's see now. Let's try Qatar. 60%. We're getting higher. 60% of GDP. So Qatar is Yeah, they're all oil and gas. And Russia, 5.3%. So Russia is not a petrostate. And when they build actions around false narratives, then they're clowns. They don't know what they're doing, and they let you know and show you evidence that they're incapable. Unfortunately, there are a lot of clowns in Washington which are running the U.S. government that they're living off of these old narratives. I think in 1991, that's when Russia had, the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia took over, and much of their income. How about Russia in 1991? Okay, let's see what their percentage of oil and gas revenues. So it wasn't that high. It peaked to 17% in 2017. That's still far away from the petrostate. Saudi Arabia is running between. Saudi Arabia is 42, and Qatar is 60. So petrostates are bordering 50%. So Russia is 5.3 right now. So that's not a petrostate. So if you build a country's action around false information, you're going to get bad results. Anyway, and we even have worse news. So let's say the U.S. takes action against all those countries doing business with Russia. Well, we have China seeking more cooperation with Russia in energy agriculture. Here's from Reuters. So China is ready to deepen cooperation with Russia in energy, agriculture, and other investments. So basically, the United States is going to sanction any country that does business with Russia. Hasn't the United States already put high tariffs against China? I believe that China was at 145% for a period of time, and then they brought it down because it wasn't going to work. The United States couldn't make it work, and it had to put the tail between its legs and cower and make these hurt puppy sounds, as it kind of left the room quietly. So anyway, this is not looking good for the U.S. action. China is cementing its economic relationship with Russia, and it's, some people may say, thumbing its nose. Other people might use another expression. But anyway, this is not looking good for this action, which is doomed to failure. This move to disable Russia as petrostate. And I went through the percentages of petrostates, and then went to show Russia is not a petrostate. Then we move on here, and we can see some charts. This is the growth. Europe was at 40% in 2020. Now it's at 5%. Then you also have Germany. Germany is 11%. It's gone down to 6%. So anyway, that's 39 and 11. That's 50%. 50% of Russia's oil income was coming from Europe. Now it is 11%. So Russia has shown the ability to diversify and to move away from these waffly customers who today love Russia and tomorrow want to create an army to march to Moscow. And now they're focusing on India, China. This will only grow. We have the good news for Russia on that front. Here we have another chart. See if I can Okay, Russia diverts oil exports to China, India, and China. So China's grown by 26%. India's grown by 111%. And we keep on getting reports that India is going to cut off all gas and oil imports into India because the United States told them to. So so India is basically an obedient, like I mentioned about the little dog that goes out and gets the newspaper, picks it up, brings it to the master, leaves it at his feet, and then gets his slippers that he forgot. The United States views India as this little dog that does stuff for it. India is saying, we don't take orders from you. We're not going to follow you. We don't care what you say. And all your sanctions aren't going to stop us. So the UK and USA has lowered its imports by almost, what says 100%. Africa has increased by 100%. Latin America has increased by 100%. So you can see European Union has lowered by 87%. So anyway, all these countries said, we don't want cheap energy for our industries. We don't want our corporations to make money. We want to use everything in our power to destroy Russia. We don't care if it bankrupts our country and means we have to start going into debt to pay for everything. And oh, by the way, we're going to continue to give money to Ukraine even if we don't have it. So you can see Russia is, the adult in the room here. It's figured out where it needs to go in order to grow its economy. And all these other countries, these pouty countries that are so angry and want to lash out at Russia for who knows what, and their economies are going down the tube. They're in the gutter, and pretty soon they will be washed away with a big rush of bankruptcies, and then we may see depression or recession in most of European countries. So anyway, you can see that Russia has moved away from all these countries that want to do it damage, and in part these countries have done it to themselves. They decided we don't want cheap energy to so we can make money and progress as a country. So Russia said, okay, fine, we'll dump you. We'll go with people who want to buy, who pay, and who are more stable customers. And Africa is growing. Africa has a lot of room to grow as far as economic growth. So while Africa is growing and buying oil and gas from Russia, and Europe is collapsing and falling into oblivion, then they will have a hard time coming back. They may show up in Moscow one day begging Russia to restart the exports, and we'll see what Russia does. Maybe it'll restart some of these pipelines, but like the Nord Stream, Germany's gonna have to pay for that. I mean, they basically looked the other way while the U.S., UK, Norway, whoever destroyed it, and then they carried out all these phony investigations. They don't even seem to want to know who's behind it. But of course, I think they already know who's behind it, and they're just covering for them. Eventually, a ruler or leader in Germany may come who really wants to know what happened and wants to restart the economy. And then when that happens, they may make some progress with Russia, but Russia's not going to invest anymore in Europe. Why would it do that? So anyway, and we have here, let's go over to the other side. We have the power of Siberia too. So this basically makes the Russia ironclad economically. And I'm not saying that Russia is a petro-state. I'm just saying that what the United States and Europe is trying to do with all their sanction packages and their punishing countries that do business with Russia they're just hurting themselves, because in the end, Russia could lose all customers for every one of its exports, and it would be fine. It is a self-contained country that doesn't need anything from anyone. And as they say, the allies of Russia is its army, its navy, and its air force. So, you can carry out all the sanctions you like, all the tariffs. You can carry out a long tariff war, and Russia will only get better, bigger, and stronger. So anyway, that's the bad news for President Trump, and we can see kind of why President Trump is doing this. You can see that the BRICS countries are already in the process of dominating the world's GDP. You can see the chart here. I mean, it's like, here's the G7. So the G7 was at 50%, right until, the I guess it would be the middle 90s, and then it began to come down. So the G7 GDP will eventually get under 20%, and the BRICS countries' GDP will be over 40% by 2050. So you can see the writings on the wall. There is a ticking time bomb in each one of these G7 countries, the ticking time bomb called their economy, which will begin to crash as we get further towards the between 2040 and 2050. And they're not going to have the economic strength to build militaries, to fight wars, to impose their hegemony. And then it'll be China, Russia, India, maybe Africa, that will be dictating to the G7 what they're going to be doing. So anyway, the whole idea of building an empire is you have to maintain it. The British Empire, it was, under Queen Victoria, I think it reached its maximum peak, although I could be wrong on that. But anyway, the British Empire reached its peak militarily, economically, as far as land goes. They said the sun never set on the British Empire. But today, there's no more British Empire. There's just the UK, and the UK is collapsing economically. Its economy is in terrible straits. They changed to the Labour government, thinking that would bring stability and change. All it did was make things worse. Keir Starmer has shown himself to be incredibly incompetent, and his number two, who is trying to remember who's the number two under Keir Starmer. Anyway, the finance minister, she has tried many different economic tricks, and they have all failed. Now they look like they're going to be raising taxes, something that they promised never to do. So if they raise the taxes, they will lose the next elections. They may even disappear as a party. That's how bad it is. So anyway, I'll put the name of the finance minister in the comments below. So sorry I forgot that. So slipped my mind. Anyway, we can also take a look at the situation in the United States. So here we have household debt service payments as a percentage of disposable personal income. So you can see around 2005, during the presidency of President Bush, our wonderful Vietnam veteran. Actually, he didn't go to Vietnam. He stayed at some military camp and smoked that funny stuff that is usually not allowed. So anyway, he didn't have much desire to go and die in Vietnam, and doesn't. So he never really learned much about the military, and you know that he didn't know much about the economy. Really, he didn't know anything about except that he talked really. He talked the talk to get himself elected twice president, and so in his second term, the economic matters begin to go out of control, and you can see here what the result. I think at some point he brought in Jon Snow as the as the as his finance guru, and Jon Snow was at one of those train companies. Not a Wall Street guy you would usually think would be there to help manage the complicated measures. But anyway, maybe he was just a yes man. I don't know. But anyway, things went horribly wrong in Bush's second term. And then it got to the point when we got to the, let's see now, when we got basically to 16% household debt as a percentage of disposable personal income, the economy crashed. So that was the 2008 crash. And so you can see there was a lull. And then somebody says, hey, the American household needs more possibility, more needs to be able to get more debt. And so they tried that didn't work. And then the economy continued to crash. And the Americans began to lower their debt. And so we got to the low point here in 2021 during the pandemic. And now we see that rising again under President Trump. And if you take a look at these various junctures, we have a rise in the household debt during the presidency of Reagan and Bush, and during this is 2016 was that Bush Trump's first presidency, so it maintained itself pretty well. He seemed to have things under control, but now that President Trump is back in office, debt is rising again. So you can see that Republican presidency generally is bad news for the U.S. economy in this area. They take on too much debt, and that's how the economy is fueled by excess debt. So you go back to see if I can find this chart. Here's the chart. So the U.S. And the G7 GDP compared to the world GDP continues to fall, and so there isn't anywhere for the U.S. to pull from. I mean, it's consumer can only handle so much debt. So we're at a little over 11% now, 11.25, and they can get up to 16%. When it's get up to 16%, that's lights out. So President Trump can only see how there's only so much President Trump can do. So he's trying to put the brakes on the train for all these BRICS economies to slow them down, and all these measures. Basically, it's not a sanction on Russia; it's a sanction on BRICS. What he wants to do is he wants to attack the whole BRICS mechanism of economic growth, and to try to maintain the dominance of the G7 countries. But it's not going to work. I mean, it's already obvious that they're in a a serial decline, and it'll only get worse for them. So they have to start thinking outside the box and stop doing these stupid measures. But anyway, then we get back to this whole thing. Well, will this slow down Russia in Ukraine? And we can go over to the deep state map here. This will tell the whole story. This is the Zaporizhia area. Over here to the top left was, if this map continued, to be Zaporizhia. So anyway, here's the region of recent Russian advances. So if I just start allowing this to advance a little bit, you can see how Russia is advancing in this Zaporizhia area. So you can see that they continue to move. So the idea that this was a stagnant war and it's a frozen conflict, and so President Trump is trying to force both sides to accept the reality that it's a frozen conflict and that there's nothing any either side can do to try to win this war. It's just a stalemate, and you start to see the advances of Russia here in the Zaporizhia front. This is deep state. This is a pro-Ukraine, basically an instrument of the Ukrainian government. So it's always a little bit behind. Always, hopeful that the Ukrainians can make a counterattack and retake some of the territory that Russia took. But anyway, you can see, okay, this is brought up to yesterday. So this is you saw how Russia is advancing here. And this isn't the only place they're advancing. So they're advancing in pretty much all areas of the front line, except, of course, Kherson. So anyway, one thing Kaya Kallas said was that, the Chinese are good with technology but bad with human relationships. And the Russians are good with human relationships and bad with technology. So another simpleton expression from Kaya Kallas, something you could, there's a lot of people in the EU who just buy into those narratives. Anyway, here is a video of, I think this is from 1 day ago. There's a new Sukhoi Su-57 fighter jet that was taken to the Dubai air show. So anyway, we're going to see how that flies. And please tell me whether the Russians are bad in technology after you see this. So, if they're bad in technology, it would just fly, the same elevation and it wouldn't move. Okay, so here it's going. Wow. So it's flipping around and doing all these things. And it looks like it's falling to the ground. It's going to fall. It's going to explode. Oh no, everyone get out of the way. I don't know. Is it going to fall to the ground and explode? No, it didn't fall to the ground and explode. Now it took off again. Now it's flying in a different direction. Now it's going to do another, fancy movement. So, anyway, that's enough of that. So, anyway, is Russia good with relationships and bad with technology? I don't think so. And unfortunately, so much money is being moved based on delusions, false narratives, all that. And, the result is going to be very, very clear. Ukraine is going to lose militarily. So they will have to raise the white flag, the little white flag. They have to raise the white flag and wave the white flag and put the white flag in all the windows in Kiev. okay? And the sanctions are going to fail. They're not going to stop Russia's growth or its energy sales. And it's certain the countries like India and China are not going to bow down to Trump and become like the little puppy dog that goes out and gets the newspaper in the morning. And also, we can say that the G7 countries are in trouble. So the data is very clear. They're in big trouble. And by taking all these ridiculous delusional actions, they're not going to fix their problem. They're not going to resolve anything. So anyway, the result is pretty clear. We go back to the initial point, which is, we can get that to come back. Well, no, it won't come back. So Trump moves to disable Russian PETRO-STATE. So anyway, keep that clear. It's not a petrostate. Trump is not going to disable Russia. He's not going to force Russia to the table, using strength, So we're in stupid mode now, and that's unfortunate for big countries to go into stupid mode, but that's what they're doing, and they will pay the price eventually. And that's, for those who are in the United States of America, that's not good news. For people in Russia, China, India, Africa, the global South that's growing, they're gonna be fine. So anyway, we're starting to see the U.S. trying to flex its muscles, and we'll see how far they get. But I don't think it'll be very far. And that's my report for today. Thank you for joining me. Again, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. If you like this report, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for joining me, and have a good day. Bye-bye.